This episode was proudly sponsored by Neller Insurance Agency, Elise Harney Real Estate, and Associated Lightning. Welcome to Main Street Moxie. I'm Thorne Christiansdottir.
And I'm Mary O'Neill.
And Mary, I'm so excited to have shared the interview with Sarah Taft Jones, who's been a family friend of mine for over 20 years. Sarah was born into a life she calls privilege. She is the great-granddaughter of William Howard Taft, who was the 27th President of the United States. And she follows in the footsteps of her family's generations of lawyers and politicians. If that wasn't enough, she is the first woman in her family to have entered the profession. Sarah entered law school at a pivotal moment for women during the Equal Rights Movement and was empowered by it. She is now a retired criminal defense attorney.
For decades, she worked at the Manhattan Criminal Defense Office's Legal Aid Society, ultimately as the attorney in charge. She also taught at New York Law School for many years. She is active in local politics and serves on the town board in Pine Plains, New York.
If that wasn't enough, she's also the coach for the Stissing Mountain High School's mock trial program, and she learns as much from her students as they learn from her. Sarah's Moxie involves mentoring, paying forward the help she received through her career, and she's an all-around inspiration and positive person who loves horses. To learn more about Sarah and this episode or any of the things we talked about, check out the show notes. Go to her website, www.mainstreetmoxie.press. Mary, I'm so excited to introduce our first sponsor, and that's the Neller Insurance Agency, who insure your entire world.
With 3 offices in Chatham, Copake, and Vallecia, New York, they are here to help you with any of your insurance needs, whether it's home, auto, business, health, farm, or life insurance. Their insurance services reach across multiple states: New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, South Carolina, Florida, New Mexico, and Wyoming.
And they insure our entire world right here. But you know what? They insure this podcast. They insure my house. They insure basically everything, from my health insurance, my jewelry, my car, my kids.
Well, Thorne, since I've known you, they've always been the person that you go to for expert advice in insurance.
They are. If there's a question or if I have another need that pops up, like when we started this podcast, I call Kirk up and I say, Kirk, what do I need to do? And he went through, well, Thorne, you're going to need this and we can do it this way or that way. So he really insured my entire world.
Well, it sounds like my kind of insurance agency.
Mm-hmm.
They are the Neller Insurance Agency, and they are here to insure your world. To learn more, visit them online at www.nellerins.com or call them at 518-392-9311, and you'll always get a human on the other end.
Elise Harney Real Estate is the #1 real estate agency for the tri-state region, providing a comprehensive overview of the entire regional market spanning Litchfield, Dutchess, Columbia, and Berkshire counties.
They proudly serve over 40 unique communities with over 33 years of experience. Whether you're searching for the perfect new home, land to build, a rental property, or a luxury estate, they are the community connection in the tri-state region of Northwest Connecticut, the Hudson Valley of New York, and the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts.
And you know what? They've proudly served us too, because our awesome office space right here on Main Street is thanks to Elise Harney Morris.
Well, my exposure to Elise Harney Real Estate is through their constant sponsorship of community events and nonprofits in the area. Having raised my kids here, they were always willing to lend a hand or support some kind of event at the school or in the community.
They always go above and beyond.
Truly above and beyond. So when it comes to your next real estate adventure, let the Elise Harney Real Estate team help guide you. Visit www.harneyrealestate.com or call 860-435-2200.
Mary, did you know that 1 out of 200 homes are struck by lightning each year? Or that a single bolt of lightning can carry over 30 million volts of electricity, and any building in the northeast of the United States can expect between 10 and 20 strikes per year? It is shocking, I know.
That sure makes me think about my home a little differently. I live on a lake, and we get a lot of lightning out there.
I can imagine. I live in the middle of the field, and I know how it is for us. But lucky for us, Rob Cooper and his entire team at Associated Lightning Rod is here to help protect your home and mine. They install lightning protection on both residential and commercial structures and have over 60 years of experience. And over 3 generations of experience. And if that doesn't scream confidence in your work, I don't know what does.
Associated Lightning services most of the Northeast of the United States, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Maine. They offer free estimates and inspections because lightning protection is not a DIY project. This one should be left to the experts.
I agree. So to learn more about lightning protection for your home or property, you can visit www.alrci.com, or you can call them today for that free estimate at 518-789-4603. Sarah, we'd like to welcome you to this podcast, and we are very excited to have you. The first question we always ask everyone, obviously because of the name of the podcast, is how you would define Moxie.
Well, since I'm here because of Moxie, I think my personal definition of Moxie is not afraid.
Oh, okay.
And not afraid, that means not afraid to speak your mind, not afraid to disagree.
Right.
And I have that in spades.
Well, I've known you for, I don't know how many years now, 20, almost 30 years, thanks to Icelandic horses. And through that time, I've been fortunate enough to get to know you. And there have been plenty of times where you've spoken your mind just in the horse realm. So I can only imagine with your career and your family that I can attest to that, seeing you in that realm.
Did you find that Moxie came naturally to you as a child? Was it something you worked on? Oh,
yes,
it was. Okay.
Yes. I came with it.
Yeah. And were your parents pleased about that at the time?
Yes. My mother left me alone and didn't interfere. And my father loved it.
Okay. Because of your family lineage of 5 generations of lawyers.
Well, but that really had nothing to do with it back then. It was just that he liked the kind of rough and tumble kid that I was.
Okay.
Were you the only girl?
No.
Okay.
I had a younger sister.
Okay.
But I did stuff that they didn't do. I'll tell you a Moxie story with my family, because this ties into my family, the Taft family. And someone gave my grandfather, who was then the senator and the leader of the Republican Party at the time, they gave him a donkey, which we immediately named Harry Truman. And I was 8 or 9 at the time. And Harry Truman was unbelievably ornery and nasty. And he was my first beast. And I would try to do things with him. And he would drag me down the gravel driveway on my stomach.
Oh, my goodness.
And I wouldn't let go. Okay.
Who was more stubborn?
Whatever. Anyway, Harry S. Truman got traded with $10 for a horse for me.
Oh.
When I was 9. And the horse hadn't been trained. And they did send him for training. And I didn't know how to ride. Mm-hmm. But I got on. And there I went. And then I fell off all the time. And then after a while, I didn't fall off. But I was, I was ready to go from the beginning.
We always like to ask, what areas of your life you feel like you have exhibited it the most or have impacted your life the most.
Well, to be a criminal defense lawyer in Manhattan for 20 years and trying cases in the criminal courts, that you have to have some toughness to do that and to be good at it. I was very good at it.
Well, you also had an obstacle earlier on, the fact that you were just, a woman at that time.
That is exactly right. And I had no idea that I would end up with that kind of a career at all, much less that I would go to law school. Because in my world, women were mostly homemakers, and certainly my mother was. But I went to college. And then I got married because that seemed like what you did. And then the women's lib movement came along. Mm-hmm. And I go, yeah, I'm there. Right. This is for me. And I had 2 small kids at home. And I got divorced. And I went to law school. I go, I got to do something. I got to do this. I got to do this. And then I had no idea what kind of law I would practice. I knew that.
Interesting.
I knew that I wanted the credential. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I was sufficiently ambitious that I didn't want 10, 15 years down the road anyone ever to say she's not sufficiently qualified.
Oh, okay.
So I knew that a law degree would do that. And so I went to law school, and it was some experiences I had in law school that gave me a better sense of my potential in terms of being able to take a lead, speak out, things of that nature. And it was a clinical program at the Columbia Law School where I was attending that had a huge impact on my career development. But I still didn't know what area I wanted to practice. The summer of my second year of law school, I went to a big law firm, and I really detested the experience.
Oh.
It made me very unhappy. They were paying me a lot of money, and I didn't like the environment. I didn't like the culture. I didn't like anything about it. And then I thought, well, maybe it's such as a large place, maybe a smaller firm would be better. And I went and interviewed at some smaller firms, and I had a very similar reaction. It wasn't for me.
Were they a certain type of law firm, though?
Well, they were doing New York practice. They were doing business. They were firms that had successful practices that were economically successful.
Okay.
So then I said, well, maybe I just don't have to decide right now. And I used the excuse after I graduated from law school that my father was running one of his Senate campaigns in Ohio at the time. So I would go and campaign with him and see what that was like. And I did that fall. And also I didn't want to, I needed to know if I had passed the bar exam, because with two small kids, I didn't want to have a job and the kids and have to study again for a bar exam.
Oh, right.
So I wanted to know that I had passed the bar exam. So I passed the bar exam. And then I decided, okay, now I've got to go find out what kind of work out there that I might like to do. And I went back to my law school professors. They gave me information. I asked anybody who had any exposure to law practices, what kind of practices out there. I did a whole exploration, investigation. And I ended up one day having lunch with a criminal defense lawyer who was doing juvenile work at the Criminal Defense Division of the Legal Aid Society. I go, wow, this is really interesting work. This is really wild. I like this. And I was able to get an interview. And because I knew a lot about the work, because I had explored it, I was able to get the job. And I never looked back. And I felt I was incredibly lucky to have work that suited me, that I was good at, that is actually not work if you like your work.
Right. That's always a dream.
It's a dream. It's a dream. And I always had that. And I was incredibly grateful to have that professional experience.
One of the things that we try to do on the Moxie podcast is give lessons or tips for listeners to incorporate some Moxie into their own life. And I feel like I'm hearing something in that you didn't just luck into that. You actually did the exploration, went down some avenues that didn't fit, came back, started again, and kind of iterative process, learning what you like, what you don't like, what you feel you could make a contribution.
One piece of I think is really, really critically important. If you are interviewing for anything, find out as much as you can ahead of time before you go into an interview about the work, what the work entails and what's it about, because that way you will have a good interview. And I did my question asking a lot before I went to the interview. And I had spent a ton of time asking questions of people in the legal profession. And they were incredibly gracious and incredibly giving of their time and energy. I really appreciated that. And I will always talk to young people coming out of school. I would always give my time. People were so generous to me. It was right. Really wonderful. And I think that's generally true.
Yeah.
That people like to help young people who are interested
right.
in bettering themselves and being successful.
I want to go back to that period of time post-college when you were a young mother casting around, and then all of this is coming at you from the women's movement. And so Ruth Bader Ginsburg went to Columbia Law School as well, or finished up.
She finished there, yes.
Finished there.
Yes. And then she taught there. I took her course.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So that was in 1933-ish that she finished up? So
No.
That she was born.
I'm sorry, she was born in 33.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I graduated in 76, so she was in the 60s.
Okay,
She
right.
was one of those people who pretty much went from college to law school, a woman, and that was unusual at that time.
Okay.
And it was very difficult for women who came through law school to get work
Right.
at that
yeah,
time,
yeah.
Right.
to be hired by anybody. And she had that problem, and Sandra Day O'Connor had that problem also.
And so in the span of about a decade, was
Things
there
changed dramatically.
really?
Okay. My ex-husband, he was at Harvard Law School, and of a class of 500, there were 6 women.
Wow.
Okay.
This is your class?
Well, that was my age group.
Okay.
I just know from him how many women were in his class of 500. There were 6. 8 years later, when I went to Columbia Law School, 1/3 of our class was women.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So it had changed absolutely dramatically, and we didn't have difficulty getting employment when we graduated. Those doors were open. It wasn't easy to get ahead in law firms, and it still isn't because of the culture of the law firms. And whether if you want to have any kind of family life, I think those places are still very difficult for women. And so we have things like the mommy track and shared jobs and stuff of that nature. And the women now are a majority coming out of law school. There are more women going to law school than men.
Wow.
But there are still very few women partners in the large firms.
Right.
There are
Right.
women partners, but they're not that many. They don't represent the law school graduates. People opt out and do other things, which is fine, but
Well,
it's
yeah.
not,
Did you, I don't know if you've seen that series, Makers, Women Who Make America. It's a 3-part documentary about the women's movement.
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I'd love to see it.
I will send you the link
I
for
would
that.
love to see that.
But they talk about Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique and what a game changer that was, that it gave a voice to things that women had been feeling, frustration or an emptiness or a longing or whatever it was. Did you have, did you read the book? Did you have friends who were feeling the same way? Did you feel very isolated?
I did not feel isolated because I remember belonging to a women's group in New York City. I also, at the time, was serving on the Radcliffe Alumni Association. And I would go to Cambridge like 4 times a year and meet with an absolutely phenomenal group of women who came in from all over the country who were part of that alumni association. And they were very, very supportive and encouraging. Of course you can do whatever you want. Of course you can do that. So that was a really wonderful supportive experience. And yeah, I was aware of what was going on. And yeah.
One of the questions we always ask as well is, how do you view failure? Because we feel like it ties into people's attitude towards it and how it helps define them and their Moxie as well.
Failure, you always, in the work that I did, because it was very high stress work, and like politics, you either win or you lose.
Right.
Trying cases, you either win or you lose for your client. So you have to develop an ability to feel the loss. I don't consider it failure. I consider it a loss, but it's painful.
Yeah.
And then you have to be able to pick up and go on to the next situation. And working through that was definitely an important part of my development professionally. So now winning and losing is of much less importance. It's like, okay, you can't control everything.
Right.
And so if it doesn't go your way, well, you did what you could. But the important thing to me is that you got to speak out.
Right.
You can't be silent. You can't, so the Moxie is what enables me to say my piece, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it makes other people uncomfortable, which it can.
Right.
But I'm not personally involved in it because I've gone beyond that. And it's just, okay, well, that was today. And then tomorrow, that's over. It's very important to leave it.
Do you think that the nature of your work, I'm assuming you were in court doing
all the time,
casework,
every day,
that helped you cultivate that mindset?
Yes. And this is kind of funny because in the beginning, when I was first practicing, I was like angry all the time. I was furious.
That's not good.
And I was really angry at the judges, and I was angry at the district attorneys. And that was made, I realized that was not effective.
Oh.
That is not effective. And the day that I could make it not personal for myself and not be personal invested in that I didn't like these people, I found that it was quite unnerving to them that I could display anger and the next minute not be angry.
That's a skill.
And that is powerful.
Yeah.
That's extremely powerful because it unnerves people. And it's like it rolls off my shoulders because of all the experience I had.
So did you intentionally set out to arrive at that place, or you just realized,
no,
oh my gosh, I'm not really...
No, that was a whole learning experience and realizing that that's not useful. It's not useful, and it doesn't get you what you want. And the whole thing in criminal defense work is you're always trying to get things that nobody wants to give you.
Right.
For your client.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you're trying to get people to do things that they aren't inclined to do from the get-go.
Yes.
So I think also it's really important in my work. It was very important and probably essential to be an optimist because it was very difficult. You were always on the side of the underdog. And people would ask me, well, why don't you just go and become a judge? That would be so cool. And I never wanted to be a judge. I never wanted to be a prosecutor. I like the role of defending somebody who is in need of assistance. And sometimes you can't do much for them. And that was the other issue that I had in practice, which is that in the beginning, I felt so bad for the situation they were in, but it was very important to understand that I hadn't made that happen.
Right.
And I didn't get them rearrested again for the fifth time.
Right.
And it's like, no, I didn't do that. They did that, and they have to deal with that. And I'm just there to assist them in whatever way I can, given their situation. Important to understand their situation and where it came from and what the whole scope of their lives looks like. So I found it very interesting, and it entitled me to ask questions about people that otherwise you would never politely ask.
I can only imagine.
And I found that just utterly fascinating and get to know their family members, and I got to see parts of the world that I never otherwise would have been exposed to. I found that it just makes you grow in different ways.
Did you find that role, I imagine you have to walk this more clinical line of the law with maintaining a sense of empathy and compassion for the stories. Was there a kind of a tension between those two?
Well, you have to. The main job of a lawyer with a client is to inform the client of what their options are.
Okay.
And the realities of their options. And there you have to be brutally honest with your clients and really, really give them the nitty-gritty on it, because sometimes, the idea of going to trial is just not a good idea, and they may not want to come to that end conclusion initially.
Right.
How did, in your 20 years, how did the atmosphere change? And you were talking about just a difference from when your husband was in law school to when you went, for just the attitude and in the atmosphere of it going from, I'd imagine, late 70s through the 80s into the 90s.
Well, when I was first practicing, there were very few women judges, and there weren't very many women DAs, and there were not very many women defense attorneys. So, and I didn't have any good role models in the world of women's lawyers that I thought were effective or wanted to be the lawyer that I wanted to be.
Okay.
And so I had to watch the men who I thought really did a good job and then adapt what they did to what I thought I could do and how I could function in that environment. And I know that I served as a role model to many, many, many of the younger women who came after me in our office, for
Was
sure.
that a conscious thought at the time that I am at this time a role model and will be for the next foreseeable future? Or was that something that came after the fact?
Well, it was just fun. That's all. It was. I really, one of the things I absolutely adored about my job was bringing on and teaching the young lawyers and watching them develop into effective advocates.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved working with younger people. I think it keeps you energized, and
Right.
I developed really excellent relations with those people, and that was purely wonderful. And sure, they would come and watch when I was doing things,
Yeah.
and sure, you would be aware of that. But that's not what your role was, to make it possible for them to achieve for themselves.
Right.
And that was incredibly exciting when you saw somebody do a really terrific piece of work after they've struggled to get there.
Right.
Because no one knows how to try a case in the beginning.
Right.
We all have, when you first go into court and you have to start doing things, it's unbelievably, overwhelmingly frightening for, I don't care who you are, and you just don't know
Mm-hmm.
the whole scene. And I remember after I'd worked there about, I don't know, maybe three, 4 years, saying to myself, no matter what happens next, I have as good an idea as anyone else what to do.
Right.
And that was really a great feeling. It was an excellent feeling.
It's just the confidence in that time frame and in the knowledge.
That I can, whatever happens, nobody else is going to have any better idea.
Right.
That I would have is just as good as idea as anybody.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That's a pretty amazing place to get to. Some people, I don't know, ever get to that place of feeling like, I sometimes think I have to keep preparing because I'm going to get that question.
Well, the other thing I did was I'm diligent. So I always read the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a wonderful, the institution I worked for had the resources to make it easy for us to be up on the law, because we had publications that came to us, and I also read the law journal as well. But so I knew what the law was, and knowing what the law is very powerful. And if it changes, being on top of that, which it does regularly. And it's why I don't practice law now, because I'm retired and I don't read the law every day.
Right.
So I have no business practicing. I read the law every day when I practiced.
Mm-hmm.
So it made me much more effective. I know lawyers who don't read the law.
Yeah, that's not good. I don't want to know their name. I'm not calling them.
And they practice on the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
And they don't look things up. And I had a wonderful supervisor when I first started. And I would be in his office every single morning, and with my problem and my case and whatever. And what he would do is he'd look at me across the desk, he'd reach behind himself, he'd pull out the law book, and he'd read me the law.
Right.
I'll go, oh, it's in the law.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah.
Here's the solution.
And then I would go off. And finally, I didn't have to come in and have him read the law to me every morning.
It's like my cousin Vinny.
I really was wondering. He was, to this day, I am grateful to him. And he didn't do it with any criticism. He just did it because this is how you should practice law.
Right.
You should look it up.
Right. I know. Go figure.
And now with the internet, you can research in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And get to the law on anything.
Yeah.
And when I realized that was really amazing. That was just amazing. So it really didn't take you any time to get, if an issue came up, to get to the lead cases and see where the law really was at in terms of case law.
Mm-hmm.
We have statutory law and case law, and they both, play a role.
The role of mentoring. As you ticked off the decades in your work life, one of the things in this Makers, I'm coming back to that again, was in the last segment, they talked about the tendency or whatever you want to call it, of younger women not to quite appreciate the sacrifices that had been made before by women, on the front lines of the equal rights movement or just kind of asserting themselves. And then I feel like with the Me Too, that whole movement in the past couple of years, it's kind of reawakened that we're not really done yet as women asserting ourselves or progressing. And I'm wondering if you saw some of that you just wanted to say to the young attorneys, you have no idea what went before you, and that you're sitting in a better place. You're standing on the shoulders of those that went before. Do you think did you feel that way as a young lawyer, that you were standing on the shoulders of the women before you who had paved the way?
I don't know if I paid much attention to that. I was so eager to get my own competence going and get it from wherever I could get it. I mean, you can see from my attributing different mentors that I had how important they are. Mentoring is absolutely critical, and everyone should mentor other people. It is just an important thing. If we want our young people to be successful, they need to be mentored.
What do you define as mentoring? Like how do you approach mentoring?
Being available for their questions, encouraging young people's questions, and having them understand that they can also be successful, and that there can be ups and downs, but that they have the potential to get where they want to go, and that they should be encouraged to look to where there are people who can help them, and ask for that help and not be feeling by themselves. I mean, part of the fact that maybe because I grew up in such a privileged family environment and people were very open, doors were open, I never had any problem asking somebody a question about something or asking for something that I wanted, and people were very receptive. I think a lot of young people are afraid sometimes to ask. And because I work with the kids at Pine Plains High School in the mock trial program, I get to know some of these younger kids, and it's very fun, but they're not apt to ask me that much. I wish they would ask me more.
Do you think it's that they're afraid, or they just don't know how?
I just don't think it's part of how they've been educated, particularly. I don't think we teach our children to ask enough questions, to be critical about information.
Right.
And then so much information is available. A big task these days is how do you sift through it?
Yes.
How do you figure out what to rely on? Where do you get your information? How do you know information is accurate? I'm constantly talking to young people about that, because I think that's the hugest task that they have ahead of them in their lives. With this glut of information.
We've had to have a few conversations at our dinner table. Oh, you got that information from social media. That does not mean it's true. Look at your sources.
Right. But social media is also can be very useful.
Oh, for sure.
And you can get really interesting information, but you got to learn how to check it out.
Yeah, right.
There are ways of checking things out, and you shouldn't take anything just on its bald face, ever, particularly these days. It's like, ooh, that's dangerous.
It's almost a form of self-advocacy to seek out the proper information and learn how to ask for it and learn how to ask people to help you find it.
Yeah.
And I think that is an important aspect of Moxie, is to be able, like you said, to advocate for yourself, to be curious, and then to find your own answers from credible sources.
Right.
It also sounds like you were naturally understood the role of mentors in your life, or seeking the counsel of others at the very least when you were doing your investigations about what kind of law you wanted to practice, how you watched other lawyers to try to help you be the lawyer you wanted to be?
Well, I had to learn that because in college, I wasn't looking for people to mentor, ask questions. I was just living a lifestyle, going to college and taking classes that I, liked. I didn't have professional ambitions when I went to undergraduate school. But when I was in law school, I had a different approach to the whole world. And I knew that I wanted to have a professional existence. And I knew that the people who were my professors or teachers could be useful in those ways. I had one professor who made a particular impression on me. And I had taken his class as a first-year student, and I'd been very unhappy with how they had run the exam at the end of the semester. And I'd stewed about it, and I wrote him a very nasty letter. Actually, there were 2 professors in the class, and I wrote them the same letter. And this professor immediately called me up and said, "Come and meet with me."
Okay.
And we sat down. He says, "You write a wicked poison pen letter." I go, yeah. And he said, "You know what? You were right.
Oh, wow.
And you need to take this clinical class that I'm teaching."
Look at that.
And it was just like, this guy, that was terrific. And that made a huge difference to me. And then I took that class, and that class, there was a lot of video in that class. It was a simulated lawsuit, and it was fascinating. And he goes, "You're very powerful in this group. Look at this." And one of the things I learned in that group was, if you're willing to stay to the very end, you could win.
Persistence pays off.
And I was willing to do that. Yeah, exactly. So I was always tenacious, So anyway, that sort of his way of dealing with me gave me permission in a lot of ways and helped me to develop. But I wasn't afraid to ask other professors for their help also, particularly when I was doing that investigation. I went to a number of them,
right,
and questioned them about different things out there.
Did your experience then with that mentoring and your teachers and in your career fuel you to become a teacher yourself and kind of pay it forward in a way?
Absolutely. And I taught, while I was practicing, I taught adjunct at New York Law School. I taught 2 years there full time, but then went back to practice because I really liked the activity of the courthouse and the trying cases and stuff like that. But yeah, I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy working with younger people.
Which you're still doing today.
Which I still do. Our mock trial's about to start up again.
Did you found that program with Pine Place?
No. I didn't. I knew the program from New York Law School.
Oh, really?
Because when I taught trial practice there, the exam was a mock trial, and we would bring in high school students from the mock trial program to sit as jurors.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And they were phenomenal. Yeah. So I knew the program because of that. And they hired a teacher at the school who knew the program, and he started the program. Oh. And then he was looking for a lawyer coach.
Okay.
And my name came up. So I've been working with him for a long time. That's
pretty progressive, though, of them to do that.
Oh yeah, it was a good principal. It was a good hire. They hired a good teacher. And we've been doing it ever since. And I have former mock trial students who are practicing lawyers today. I have mock trial students who are in law school today.
So you made all the difference in those lives.
Well, I made 8.
Well, in that instance with the program,
little, you have a little bit of impact there. Yeah. Doesn't mean they wouldn't be lawyers otherwise. They probably would, but
perhaps
they had that experience, and we had that program. We have a lot of fun in that program, and the thing is, it's rigorous, and I think that young people need to be urged to be very rigorous in their work habits, in their thinking, in their performance. That if you hold young people to a high standard, you get a high standard of performance.
Yes,
it's just a given.
Yeah,
and too much we don't do that in this country nationally. I think
right,
it's an issue.
With that, it kind of bounces off into another question that we often like to ask. Is some folks will view people who have Moxie or have achieved certain things in their lives that may have just been handed to them. But what you just said is you need to put the work in.
That's right. The other thing I wanted to say, which I think is kind of fun, is that when I got divorced, I had the option of taking my maiden name back.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a reason I didn't do it. I didn't want people to play on that. I want them to see me how I was.
Right.
And I wanted to accomplish it for myself.
Right.
Mm.
And, that was a conscious decision because I definitely could have done that.
Well, that's interesting because obviously you have 5 generations of pretty substantial.
I have 5 generations of lawyers on my father's side of the family, but I'm the first girl.
Right.
And there was no expectation that a girl should be a lawyer in my family.
Oh.
There was no expectation.
Were your parents ultimately supportive?
Well, my mother died before I became a lawyer.
Okay.
But my father ultimately was extremely supportive, yes.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
I became a lawyer.
Right.
But he had told me, well, you would be taking the position of a man who needed to support his family.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh,
I grew up
interesting.
I grew up in a very traditional environment. They were
That's what Thorne said to me about
conservative
this.
Republicans.
Yeah,
What else is new?
Yeah.
Right.
But you were supporting also your family, so it would.
Well, he saw that then because I had gotten divorced, and he understood. Oh, when I went to law school, he was very supportive of that.
Okay.
Very supportive, very extremely supportive. No problem there. But things had changed even for him and their thinking.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
This notion of community service or serving in some way seems also intergenerational, aside from being a lawyer.
Well, the idea that you can have an impact on your government, the idea that government could be relevant and that government could accomplish things was very much part of my background. And you had I always felt you had an obligation to be involved and you had an obligation to be informed.
Right.
And when I came up here, I would go to meetings, and I went to meetings for a long time, and then
You mean like town meetings?
but if you're not at the table, you don't really have much of a say.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I decided to run for the town board was that way I would be at the table and I would have more of a potential to have an impact. And it's very true. It's very true.
Well, you obviously made an impact for the fact that both parties supported you.
At that time, yes. When I ran for re-election, I got the support, the endorsement of both parties, which was good. That was nice.
Well, a little less conflict that way.
Yeah. And local government, I feel, should be basically politics free.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think politics has any real or should have any real role in local government. I think that in our town, most people are really after the same things. When you start asking people why they like it, what they like about it, most people are pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
And so that's and the town board that I've been working on has been very non-political, which is, we have gotten a lot of things done because we don't fight with each other. We try to see what's the best solution here when a problem comes up.
Well, it's understanding your neighbor.
Yeah,
because you're
These are people in our town.
It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. Wait a second, we're in this thing. We're in the boat together, and
that's how I see it for sure, definitely.
Well, that's how it should be. I feel. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Too bad we can't take that to the higher up part of the government, but
and it's really a shame because people should be much more. It should just be more cordial and polite and respectful of anyone in society. Period.
Yep, I agree.
Everywhere, and government particularly, there should be cordiality, and there certainly used to be, and it's really been eroded badly, and we have to try to get that back.
Well, it starts at the ground level with the towns and villages, like ours.
We'll try.
How do you envision that could come about? Because I sometimes look at where we are today and I just feel, what would it take for us to start building that up again? Is it this local? Is it some cataclysmic event?
No. I think a great deal could be done if we all went back and studied civics. If we studied it and understood where we came from and how the country was formed and where the problems were, because we're carrying forward problems
Right.
From our founding. There's no question about that to me. But if you study civics and you get an understanding of the complexities involved, and you have an understanding, and by civics I mean going back to what is government, and why do you have government, and then how do you create a government that can function. That would be helpful. I think one of the biggest problems that we've had is how we've permitted our campaign financing to completely go uncontrolled. And I think that has been devastating to us. And I wish that the constitutional amendment to correct that would go forward. And I think that, but it doesn't look promising right now. At the present time, and that may change.
Right.
It may change.
Right.
But I think we need a constitutional amendment to overturn the campaign finance situation as it is today.
How do you view luck and creating opportunity in your life? I mean, you've mentioned that you had certain privilege of being born into a family that gave you a certain outlook, but you haven't sat back and let that control the flow of your life. You chose not to take back your maiden name. So you have, throughout your life, created your own opportunities.
Yeah, but I always say that when they were handing stuff out, I got way more than my share.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel that I did. And you know, I never had trouble in school.
Right.
I had a very secure family. I had economic security. I mean, that's just a huge benefit and asset. Sure, there's luck along the way, but definitely I had a very fortunate early period.
Does that understanding inform, this desire in you to mentor and to help young people and to,
I just think that young people are our future.
Yeah.
And if you're not involved with young people, do you care about the country? I care about the country. My family always cared about the country and the direction and policy and what kind of approach. And I don't agree with them, what their positions were necessarily, but they were always considered, and the education was always stressed in my family. Education was always one of the most important things. And I had a mother who never let us believe that we were better than anyone else. It was a big reminder of that. And she totally played down any of the publicity and interest that even back then the media had. I mean, I had a grandfather who was on the cover of Time magazine 4 times and Life magazine a number of times. And that's odd.
Right.
That's an odd thing as a child to see that, it's a little different. So, but no, you're not special.
Right.
You're no better than anybody else. You got to do the work. You got to do, for yourself. And they were great. I mean, I had parents who were really good to me.
Right.
It was very good for me, and I solid in values.
Right.
Was there a high expectation considering, your great-grandfather was president?
No, there was no expectation. I was a girl.
Right.
There was no expectation.
So was that in some ways liberating? In a way that maybe your older brother who...
Yes. And I could leave the name behind.
Yeah.
He can't.
Right.
He can't. He's stuck with it.
Right. Yeah. I never thought of it that way.
So it's like, okay, well, lucky me.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I was able to do as I wanted. I was able to create a life that really I have enjoyed living.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So that's fun.
Just to wrap up, if you were coaching someone to cultivate some moxie in their own life, whether it's to change careers or pursue further education or lose 20 pounds or seek out healthy relationships, what in any way that they were trying to create moxie, what would you advise them? Like characteristics or traits or habits?
Take small risks. Small risks first. Risk something that's a little hard for you. Do it.
Yeah.
Try it. That's what the mock trial. We're getting these kids to stand up and present material.
Right.
Well, we're asking them to take big risks
Yeah.
for them.
Right.
But doing that, you could say, well, that's a little risk, but it's not for them individually.
No.
You got to take a risk. And then you say, oh man, I did that.
Right.
And then you say, look, you did it.
Right.
You did it. And it worked.
Yeah.
It's like fantastic.
Yeah.
And so the feedback is really important to get positive feedback. So if somebody does something, if they take a risk and they do something good, give them the feedback. People are dying for feedback.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And also to coach them if they need a little support of what they didn't quite hit the mark
Correct.
on.
And how do you, the trick is to coach somebody so that you don't, that you aren't hurtful.
Right. Or discouraging.
Or discouraging.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That you have to be careful how you say something.
Right.
At times.
Well, I think that's...
And then be ready to apologize if it didn't go well.
Yeah, exactly.
Apologies are really important. If you do something
They're underrated.
Yeah. You have to be willing to apologize.
Yes.
And confront what happened. Oh, I'm sorry that.
Right.
And I should have said it better.
Right.
Like that professor that I had.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wicked letter. You were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We won't be doing that again. I think, thank you so much.
I know. How rare was he, right?
Yeah.
To find a professor that's
I know,
willing to say, yeah, that was really not the best way
That
to do
didn't work
that.
out so good.
Well, this podcast has worked out really well.
Well, thank you. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah.
Absolutely.
And I've loved to learn more about you in this capacity, even though I knew snippets of it, but it's been fantastic for me. And I'm so glad Mary got to experience you with us.
Yeah, this
And
has
I
been
still
great.
get to have Icelandic horses.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
How many do you have now?
There are 5.
None of them are like the donkey?
No.
No, that was a good trade.
No.
That was the best trade.
Yeah, it was a good trade. And that horse was there for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
My old horse. Right.
Wow.
Oh, and here's a good one. And I got to have a picture on my horse with my family that was published in the National Geographic
Oh.
when I was about 12 years old.
That's a keeper.
And I was pissed off because it was in black and white, not color.
How could they?
Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great.
Mary, we're in the wrap-up section for Sarah Taft Jones. And how fun was that?
That was super fun.
Sarah is so positive. She's so energetic. And I always love running into Sarah, talking to Sarah, because she always has a smile on her face. And to experience her, someone I've known since I was a kid, and learn about her entire story. I mean, I had goosebumps so many times talking to her and having her tell us her story.
It was living history.
It really
was
was.
not that long ago that it was very different for women in the workplace.
That just blew my mind. So many points that she made. And like her father even saying, she's taking a job away from, a man who's supporting his family. But she was too. And that kind of, at that time, was changing. And she was part of that. I mean, as you just said, she's a part of living history, and it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And the total lack of cynicism and complete positivity.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what a demanding career.
In all aspects.
Yes.
Single mother, divorced at the time, having this huge family history of icons. And Sarah still being her own person. Very much so.
One of the things that I really took away from her was how much she believes in mentoring those who are coming after her, just as she was mentored through her career.
Her entire career. Yeah, I loved how she talked about that and how much respect she paid to not just her professors, but also to some of her contemporaries or people she worked with and for. And, I've known her, in her almost retired life exclusively, but knowing how involved she is in the community and the program with her kids. I mean, did you see how she just lit up talking about them?
Yeah, that mock trial program sounds amazing. And they are so lucky to have her. And when you say that to her, her response is, I'm so lucky to be involved with those kids' lives.
I just got goosebumps again.
Yeah, she's incredible.
So
what did you think of
inspirational.
her strength of character? And
For me to, hearing Sarah's story and having, your great grandfather was the president, your brother is the governor, your senators and governors and people of, major impact on the entire nation is your heritage. Some people would, they couldn't handle that. But Sarah, as she explained, which is so, interesting, she was the girl or a woman. So she wasn't expected to do anything. So I just thought that was so mind blowing. But, Sarah being Sarah, the confidence in whatever she took on, to me, is her brand of Moxie, her kindness, her humility, and her drive. That to me just, goes to the core of who she is. It doesn't matter what obstacle she faces or, what challenge is there. She overcomes every step of the way because she knows she can do it.
Yeah, I found her inspiring and
on so many levels.
And you talk about her humility. I don't think she sets out to be that inspiration, and yet she just quietly does it. And her civic responsibility that she takes very seriously by being in local government, by being involved in the high school. I really admire that. And it's something that I hope to take away from this.
I do too. And I hope all of our listeners, not just enjoyed her story, but, as you started this recap off with, how she is a part of living history. And I think we can all learn lessons from that. And we hope that if you have inspirational thoughts or what you took away, leave it in our comments on our Facebook
and Instagram.
All right, Mary, talk soon.
Thank you.
This episode was proudly sponsored by Neller Insurance Agency, Elise Harney Real Estate, and Associated Lightning.